When someone who is already committed, married no less, still wants you, it can stir a storm of confusion, validation, shame, and longing. On the surface, it may seem like you're just caught in a complex situation, one laced with desire and secrecy. But underneath that, something far deeper is happening. You're being confronted with a reflection of your own shadow, your unconscious patterns, your hidden wounds, and your unfinished attachments. The reason this situation feels so emotionally charged isn't only because of what he does or says. It's because it activates a dormant story within you, a story you may not have even known you were still telling yourself. His attention brings up something from your past. May be a time when you felt unseen, unloved, or not chosen. And now here is someone who sees you even when he shouldn't. That contradiction is precisely what makes it so addictive. You are not just entangled with him, you're entangled with an unresolved version of yourself. Unfinished attachment isn't always about the person in front of you. It's about the template you carry within you. You may find yourself asking, why me? Why does he keep coming back? But the real question is, why do I allow myself to remain emotionally available to someone who isn't? Something in you is still hungry for what he represents. Validation, significance, maybe even redemption. But these desires do not emerge from the soul. They come from wounds you've not yet named. The shadow speaks in whispers. If he leaves her for me, I will finally be enough. If he still wants me, then I matter. If I keep him interested, then I win. But this voice isn't truth. It's the ghost of old pain trying to soothe itself with illusions. The uncomfortable truth is this. If you need someone else's broken promises to feel worthy, you are still disconnected from your own center. To overcome these feelings, you have to stop focusing on what he wants and start examining what you've been avoiding. When someone unavailable gives you attention, it tempts you to bypass your own loneliness. But loneliness is sacred. It reveals what you've abandoned within yourself. You must sit with that ache, not numb it, not romanticize it, just sit with it. In doing so, you begin to reclaim your power. It's tempting to believe that his desire means something profound, but desire, especially from someone who has already made vows to another, often reflects their own internal chaos, not a testament to your worth. You are not his unfinished business. You are your own unfinished becoming. The real work is not about whether he stays or goes. It's about asking yourself, what version of me is still holding the door open? It could be the little girl who was overlooked, or the woman who was once betrayed and swore she'd never be invisible again. That part of you deserves attention, not from him, but from you. When you turn toward that part with compassion instead of shame, something begins to shift. You stop seeing him as the prize. You stop seeing his pursuit as flattery. You begin to see it for what it is, a mirror. A mirror showing you where you still have healing to do, where you still confuse intensity with love, and where you still believe that someone else's broken loyalty is a reflection of your value. You cannot fully heal while staying emotionally tied to someone who keeps your heart in limbo. The shadow doesn't dissolve by chasing closure. It dissolves when you shine awareness on it. And when you see what's really binding you, you realize it was never him. It was the story you still needed to let go of. It's easy to mistake his ongoing attention for something meaningful, something that makes you feel important, desired, even special. But this illusion isn't love. It's the ego being seduced by the possibility of winning. When someone who already has a partner still wants you, the situation becomes less about genuine connection and more about identity, about how you see yourself reflected in his desire. Deep inside, your ego begins to whisper, if he still wants me, even with a wife, then I must be irreplaceable. I must be more, but that voice isn't your truth. It's your ego reaching for validation, not love. The ego craves significance. It feeds on contrast. He picked me, not her. It finds power in comparison. He wants me even though he's committed elsewhere. This dynamic becomes less about your heart and more about your position. You're no longer just a person with feelings. You become a role in his story. But here's what's dangerous. Every time your self-worth is measured by how badly someone else wants you, especially someone who cannot fully have you, you're placing your value in someone else's chaos. That is not power, that is bondage. The need to be validated is not inherently wrong. We all long to be seen, affirmed, and chosen. But when validation becomes addictive, when it blinds you to your own self-neglect, then it becomes a trap. And it's a trap that often disguises itself as empowerment. You might think, if he's still thinking of me, if he's still reaching out, I still matter. But mattering to someone who betrays another does not affirm your worth. It confirms your own abandonment of self. When a man is married and still pursues you, the spotlight is rarely about love. It's about conquest, confusion, or avoidance. His and possibly yours. But your ego may interpret his persistence as proof that you're unforgettable. That you have something she doesn't. That somehow you've won a secret war she doesn't even know she's fighting. But is it really a win if you have to live in the shadows? Is it really a victory if your joy is always tied to someone else's indecision? This is not about him. It's about what you've come to believe you need to feel whole. Letting go of false importance means stepping back and asking, why do I feel better about myself when he wants me, even if he can't truly choose me? You begin to realize that your ego has tricked you into thinking that being wanted is the same as being worthy. It isn't. Real worth doesn't come from being desired. It comes from being at peace with who you are, even when no one is watching, even when no one is choosing you. The ego doesn't want peace. It wants recognition. It wants the upper hand. But your soul wants truth. And the truth is, no genuine connection can thrive where secrecy, guilt, and dishonor live. If his attention is costing you your dignity, your clarity, your emotional safety, it's not attention, it's a weapon, and the ego is holding it to your throat while calling it love. You don't need to be the exception. You need to be your own authority. You need to say, I refuse to be chosen in halves. I refuse to feel powerful in someone else's betrayal. I want more, and I will not confuse being desired with being respected. When you let go of the need to be validated through someone else's confusion, you return to yourself. You come home, not to the fantasy of being wanted, but to the deeper reality of being whole, without needing to be someone's hidden obsession. That's not ego, that's liberation. When someone who is already committed gives you their attention, it can feel electrifying. Like a private, sacred bond exists between you that transcends circumstance. Every glance, every late-night message, every lingering word feels like proof that there's something real. But what often goes unnoticed in these emotionally charged dynamics is how much of what you're feeling isn't actually about him. It's about you. Or more precisely, the parts of you you've projected onto him. Projection is a powerful force. It happens when you unconsciously cast your unmet needs, unresolved wounds, and unfulfilled desires onto another person, mistaking your internal hunger for a shared connection. You may believe you're falling in love with him, that this magnetic pull is destiny, but more often than not, what you're experiencing isn't intimacy. It's a mirror reflecting your inner longing. You're seeing what you want to see, not who he truly is. You might project qualities onto him that soothe your insecurities. He's thoughtful, emotionally deep, different from others. But how much of that is based on real, shared vulnerability? Has he shown up consistently, with integrity, honesty, and presence? Or has he shown you just enough to keep your emotional investment alive? Enough to awaken your hope, but not enough to step into truth. There's a difference between someone giving you attention and someone giving you themselves. And if you're constantly interpreting mixed signals as emotional depth, it's time to pause. Attention is not the same as intimacy. One can be fleeting, manipulative, and self-serving. The other requires openness, transparency, and risk. True intimacy asks something sacred of both people. It asks for honesty. And if one of you is hiding, lying, or betraying another, what's happening isn't intimacy. It's illusion dressed up as connection. This is difficult to accept, especially when you've built a story around the idea that your bond is unique. But you must ask yourself, is he emotionally available, or is he simply emotionally expressive in moments that benefit him? Is he seeking connection, or is he escaping something from his marriage, his responsibilities, or even his own dissatisfaction? When you're emotionally entangled with someone who already belongs to someone else, your mind tends to romanticize the tension, turning the forbidden into something divine. But often, the only thing divine in the experience is the message it's trying to deliver about your own unhealed parts. You must be brave enough to peel back the layers, to look at how you might be using him as a placeholder for your own inner emptiness. Because if his words light up your nervous system, but his actions leave you uncertain, then you are not in love. You are in projection. The story you tell yourself about what could be is blinding you to what is. Reality doesn't hide. Reality doesn't need secrets, late night texts, or private fantasies. It doesn't ask you to shrink yourself or wait in the wings. Reality is clear, it's stable, and most importantly, it's mutual. When you stop mistaking attention for intimacy, you begin to dismantle the illusion that has kept you bound. You stop fantasizing about what he could become and start seeing what he has always been: inconsistent, unavailable, and divided. Letting go of projection is not just about waking up. It's about taking back the parts of yourself you handed over in your longing to be chosen. You are not incomplete without his gaze. You are not validated by his desire. You are whole when you stop confusing emotional intensity with emotional truth. What you truly want isn't a man who wants you in secret. What you want is someone who can meet you in the open, heart exposed, with nothing to hide, and that begins when you stop projecting and start seeing. Infatuation has a way of pulling us outward, making us orbit around someone else's attention, choices, and contradictions. When you find yourself consumed by the thoughts and desires of a man who already has a wife, it's easy to believe that what you feel is love, that there must be some cosmic reason for the emotional intensity. But often, what you're experiencing is not sacred connection. It's disconnection from your inner self. You've left your center. You've wandered far from your truth. And now, your emotional energy is feeding someone else's indecision, someone else's fantasy, someone else's drama. This is where the call to individuation comes in, not as a concept, but as a necessity. Because when you are lost in infatuation, you are living through someone else's narrative. You've traded your inner ground for the emotional high of being wanted, even if it's only in pieces, even if it's only in shadows. And in doing so, you've abandoned the one thing that can save you, your relationship with yourself. To individuate is to return, to peel back all the false layers of identity you've constructed around being desired, chosen, or remembered by someone who cannot and will not fully choose you. Infatuation is seductive because it mimics depth. It mimics destiny. It whispers to the parts of you that still ache for affirmation. If he still thinks about me, if he still wants me, then I must be special. But what if your specialness doesn't need to be proven through someone else's emotional confusion? What if it already exists untouched in your wholeness? Returning to your inner center requires fierce honesty. You must ask yourself, what have I sacrificed to keep his attention alive? What parts of my intuition did I silence so I could keep believing in this bond? Infatuation asks you to abandon your clarity for fantasy. Individuation demands you reclaim your clarity, even when it hurts. This is not about making him wrong. It's about making yourself real again. Because underneath all of this, his calls, his longing, his pursuit, is a deeper question. What am I doing with my life energy? Every time you answer his message, every time you rehearse imaginary futures with him, you are leaking sacred energy. Energy that could be used to build your life, to create, to heal, to rise. But instead, it's being poured into a connection that keeps you in emotional limbo. And limbo is not love. It's spiritual stagnation. To return to your inner center means remembering who you were before he came into the picture. Not just what you did or what you believed, but how you felt about yourself. Were you clear? Were you grounded? Were you at peace? Infatuation often arrives when we are disconnected, when life feels flat, when we long for color. He may have brought back feeling, excitement, aliveness. But feeling alive through someone else is not the same as being alive within yourself. Individuation is the process of separating what's yours from what never was. It's realizing that you don't need to be the exception in his story to be exceptional in your own. It's choosing to reclaim your autonomy, not to punish him, not to prove anything, but to protect the sacredness of your own becoming. You are not here to be a side note in someone else's divided heart. You are here to be whole, to walk with clarity, to live with your soul intact. The moment you begin to choose your peace over his attention, your path over his pull, your truth over his turmoil, that is the moment you begin to heal. Not because he let go, but because you finally did. Longing is not a weakness. It is a powerful force. A signal from the soul that something within you remains unmet, unhealed, or unseen. When a man who is already committed keeps showing up in your emotional world, and you still feel that deep yearning for him despite knowing he cannot fully be yours, the longing intensifies. It turns into a craving, a hunger for something that feels just out of reach. But what you may not realize is that this longing, as painful and confusing as it is, holds the potential for transformation, not through him, but through you. This is the beginning of emotional alchemy. To long for someone is to believe that they hold something you cannot give yourself. You feel drawn to the way he looks at you, the way he speaks to you, the way he makes you feel in the rare moments you connect. And in those moments, you're convinced that it means something, that it's proof of a deeper love. But what if the real message behind your longing isn't about him at all? What if it's a call to turn inward, to discover what part of yourself is waiting to be claimed? Emotional alchemy begins when you stop resisting the longing and start listening to it. Instead of asking, how can I get him to choose me? Or why can't I stop thinking about him? Begin to ask, what does this ache say about my own need? Where have I abandoned myself in the process of being wanted? Because longing is often born from neglect, not his neglect, but yours. Somewhere along the way, you began to believe that someone else could give you the love, devotion, and attention you were unwilling or afraid to give yourself. It's easy to make him the symbol of everything you desire: connection, passion, significance. But the real alchemy happens when you realize you can be the source of those things. That you can show up for yourself with the same intensity you hoped he would show up for you. That you can begin to meet your own needs with devotion instead of delay. This is not about self-love as a cliché. It's about self-loyalty, the decision to stop betraying your inner knowing for temporary emotional highs. Self-loyalty means saying no when every part of you wants to say just one more time. It means choosing silence over breadcrumbs, choosing your peace over emotional chaos. It's the art of walking away, not just physically, but energetically. It's not easy. In fact, it might be one of the hardest things you ever do, but it's also the most liberating. Longing, when left untransformed, becomes a prison. It keeps you tethered to someone else's shadow while your own light grows dim. But when you begin to hold that longing with compassion and use it as fuel to return to yourself, something profound shifts. You no longer see him as the answer. You see him as the mirror, a mirror that showed you where you still needed to come home to yourself. You begin to realize, I don't need to be chosen by someone who hides me. I need to be loyal to the parts of me I've kept hidden. You begin to build trust, not in his words or promises, but in your ability to walk away from what hurts and toward what heals. That is emotional alchemy. That is turning longing into gold, not by chasing him, but by choosing you, not by hoping he'll change, but by honoring the change already stirring within you. You are not longing for him. You are longing for the version of yourself that no longer needs him, and she is already on her way. There's a kind of exhaustion that doesn't come from the body, but from the soul, from constantly thinking about someone who is no longer or never fully was yours. When a man who is already committed continues to haunt your mind, your emotions, your dreams, it's more than just a romantic entanglement. It becomes a psychic tie, a tether that keeps pulling at your energy, looping you back into a cycle of longing, confusion, hope, and emotional depletion. And until that invisible cord is cut, your life will feel paused, your growth muted, your power quietly leaking into someone else's illusion. Psychic ties are forged not just through touch or time, but through emotional intensity, through repeated thoughts, unspoken fantasies, silent grief, and unmet expectations. Every time you rehearse a memory, every time you imagine him leaving her for you, every time you feel the sting of being wanted but not claimed, the cord tightens. What you're really binding yourself to is not just him, but to the version of yourself who still believes she needs him to feel whole. This is where the illusion becomes dangerous, because it's not always him you're missing. Often, you're missing the idea of who he could be, the potential you saw, the fantasy you nurtured in the quiet hours. You're holding on not to reality, but to a storyline where he eventually wakes up, realizes your worth, and finally chooses you. But every day spent waiting for that moment is a day spent investing in a dream that may never come true. And that dream, beautiful as it may seem, is keeping you from your truth. Cutting the psychic tie isn't about anger or blame. It's not about pretending you never cared. It's about calling your energy back. It's about saying, I release the parts of me still holding space for someone who cannot hold space for me. That's not cold. That's clarity. You don't need to hate him to free yourself, but you do need to stop letting his presence linger in your emotional field. This work is not just emotional, it's spiritual. It involves taking inventory of your energy. Where is your attention going the moment you wake up? Who are you thinking about before you fall asleep? What feelings do you carry throughout the day that are rooted in a story that no longer serves your healing? You cannot step fully into your future while you're still emotionally and energetically tied to someone who keeps you tethered to the past. Reclaiming your energy means creating rituals of release, writing unsent letters, setting boundaries in silence, unhooking your thoughts from his name, his image, his imagined presence. It means making peace with the fact that closure may never come from him. It will come from you. The illusion only has power when you continue to feed it. When you stop rehearsing what could have been and start embodying what is, the cord begins to loosen. You may feel grief as you let go, not just of him, but of the identity you built around being the one he almost chose. That grief is sacred. It signals the end of one cycle and the beginning of another, one in which you are no longer bound to half-hearted affection, stolen moments, or secret hopes. You begin to realize that your energy is yours. Your heart is yours. Your future is no longer dependent on someone else's confusion. The moment you cut that tie, not just in thought but in spirit, you will feel it. A silence where there was once noise, a calm where there was once restlessness. That is your soul, returning home to itself. That is the moment you remember who you are, not someone waiting to be loved, but someone finally choosing to love herself enough to let go.